Before we begin, let the day loosen its hold. Let your breath slow, in and out. Imagine a night sky spread wide and patient, stars placed gently like small lamps, and the world beneath them settling into quiet. In the old stories of Greece, the gods were not always distant thunder. Sometimes they were felt as warmth at the hearth, as the hush in a sacred grove, as the strange comfort of being guided without seeing the guiding hand. This story begins with Psyche, a young woman whose name means soul, and whose journey is less about danger and more about becoming. Psyche lived in a place where hills rolled softly into valleys, where stone paths were worn smooth by footsteps, and where olive trees held the moonlight in their leaves. She was known not for loudness, not for command, but for a quiet presence that made others soften around her. People noticed her the way they notice a gentle song, not because it insists, but because it steadies the air. And as sometimes happens in small communities, the noticing grew into stories. Whispers gathered like birds in the morning. They said Psyche's beauty was unusual, not sharp or dazzling, but calm, the kind that made people pause and remember to breathe. It wasn't that Psyche wanted to be admired. If anything, she felt uneasy beneath attention, as though the world had placed a bright lantern too near her face. She longed for ordinary days, water carried from a well, bread warmed over coals, quiet talk at dusk. But attention has its own gravity. It pulls, it gathers, it changes the way others look at you before you have changed at all. Psyche's home was loving, and yet she often felt alone in the center of admiration. People came to look, to compare their hopes to her presence, to make meaning out of what they didn't understand. Some offered flowers, some offered prayers, some simply stared as if stillness itself were a kind of answer. And Psyche, in her gentleness, began to wonder if she was meant for something else, not in ambition, but in a quiet question that lingered in her heart. Where do I belong? In the myths, there is talk of divine jealousy, of gods who notice human attention. But in this sleep story, we will not follow harshness. We will follow the softer current beneath it, the way a life can be turned, not by cruelty, but by mysterious calling. One evening, as twilight deepened, Psyche stood by an open window. The air was cool and clean. A breeze moved through the room like a hand smoothing a blanket. She watched the horizon darken. She watched the first star appear, steady and calm, as if it had been waiting patiently for her to look up. That night, a message came, not with shouting, not with fear, but as a quiet instruction spoken by someone older, someone trusted, someone who had learned to listen to unseen currents. It said Psyche would travel, not to punishment, not to harm, but to a new place, a place that would ask for trust. And though Psyche's heart trembled at the thought of leaving, the trembling was not panic. It was the trembling of stepping into change, like the moment before you enter sleep, when the mind begins to let go. At dawn, Psyche prepared. Her clothing was simple. Her hair was braided neatly. She brought no weapons, no armor, no heavy protection, because this was not a journey of battle. It was a journey of listening. She walked with those who loved her to a high place where the air felt thin and bright. From there, the land spread out like a woven cloth, fields, paths, rivers shining quietly. Psyche stood at the edge of that height and let the wind move around her. The breeze did not feel like a force pushing her away. It felt like guidance, a steady support under her steps, as if the world itself had become a gentle hand inviting her forward. And then, as softly as drifting, Psyche felt herself carried, not in panic, but in calm surrender over the land. Below her, the world moved slowly. Above her, the sky remained wide and patient. The wind was warm, and it held her as if it had known her all along. When her feet touched ground again, she was no longer on the familiar hills near home. She stood in a valley where everything seemed quieter, as though sound itself had chosen to speak gently here. Before her rose a palace, not a harsh palace of cold stone and sharp corners, but a place that looked as if it had been made from moonlight and marble, from soft shadow and pale gold. Its doors stood open, and though Psyche's heart beat faster, the air did not feel threatening. It felt welcoming, like walking into a warm room after a long journey. Psyche stepped inside. The palace was still, not empty, but attentive. The floors were smooth beneath her feet. The walls held faint patterns like vines and stars. Somewhere water murmured, as if a small fountain was speaking quietly in another chamber. And then Psyche heard something else. A voice, soft, kind, and close, though she could not see anyone. "Welcome," it said, not as command, but as reassurance. Psyche stopped and listened. The voice did not rush. It did not insist she answer. It simply existed, steady as candlelight. "You are safe here," the voice said. "You may rest." And as those words settled, Psyche felt something in her shoulders loosen. A tension she had carried for too long began to soften. Invisible attendants moved through the palace, not in eerie ways, but in gentle signs of care. A curtain shifted, letting in fresh air. A lamp glowed warmer. A table appeared set with simple food: bread, honey, fruit, water cool as moonlight. Psyche ate slowly, as if learning that she could receive without proving she deserved it. Afterward, she wandered through quiet rooms. A bed lay prepared with clean linens. A robe was folded neatly. Everything seemed arranged by unseen kindness. Night arrived. The palace changed with the darkness. The air grew softer. The lamps became dimmer. A hush gathered like a blanket. Psyche lay down. Her thoughts drifted, not in fear, but in wondering. Who speaks to me? Who watches over this place? Why can I not see them? The voice returned, close now, intimate as breath. You do not need to know everything tonight, it said. Only this. Trust the night. Trust the care you can feel. Psyche's heart answered with a quiet ache, the ache of wanting to see what she already cherished, the ache of curiosity, so human, so tender. But she also felt something else, a calm presence beside her, as if someone sat near the edge of her sleep, keeping watch not to control her, but to protect her rest. In the darkness, Psyche could not see the face of the one who spoke. She could only feel the gentleness, the steady warmth, the careful distance that honored her boundaries. And slowly, Psyche learned the rhythm of this place. By day, she walked in the palace gardens, gardens that shimmered quietly, full of pale blossoms and soft leaves. By evening, she returned to her room, and the voice returned too, offering conversation like a lullaby. Night after night, Psyche began to trust. Not blindly, not foolishly, but with the slow courage that grows when kindness repeats itself. She learned that intimacy is not always seeing. Sometimes it is listening. Sometimes it is allowing yourself to be cared for without demanding proof. Yet deep inside, curiosity waited, not loud, not urgent, but steady as a hidden star, a thought that said, "One day, I will understand." And as Psyche drifted towards sleep in the moonlit palace, the unseen presence beside her felt both near and far, like music heard through a wall, comforting, mysterious, and real. Night after night, the palace settled into its familiar rhythm. Psyche learned the way the air cooled gently after sunset, the way lamps dimmed themselves as if they too wished to rest, the way silence arrived not as emptiness, but as companionship. Each evening, the unseen presence returned. The voice spoke quietly, never interrupting her thoughts, never filling every pause. It asked about her day, it listened when she answered, and sometimes it simply stayed near, sharing the stillness. Psyche found that she slept deeply in this place. Her dreams were calm. They moved like water, images forming, dissolving, reforming, without fear or urgency. When she woke, the palace greeted her with the same steady kindness. Food appeared when she was hungry, paths opened when she wished to walk, gardens welcomed her steps without asking her to choose a direction. It was, in many ways, an easy life. And yet, ease can sometimes awaken questions just as surely as hardship. As Psyche's trust deepened, so did her curiosity. Not a sharp curiosity that demanded answers, but a gentle wondering that sat quietly at the back of her mind. Who is it that speaks to me? Who shares my nights yet remains unseen? Why am I asked to trust without sight? These questions did not feel dangerous, they felt human. Psyche did not speak them aloud at first. She let them exist as thoughts, as passing clouds. But curiosity, like water, finds its way into every open space. Sometimes, as she lay in bed at night, she would notice the warmth beside her, the careful distance maintained with respect, and her heart would fill with both comfort and longing. Longing not for possession, but for understanding. The voice never forbade her curiosity. It never scolded her for wondering. Instead, it spoke gently of trust. Some things, it said once, grow best in the dark. Psyche listened, and part of her understood. But another part, the part that was learning, the part that was growing, felt that understanding was also a form of care. Curiosity does not always come from doubt. Sometimes it comes from love. As days passed, small influences began to shape Psyche's thoughts, whispered concerns carried by memory, old voices from her past reminding her that seeing was believing, that clarity was safety. She did not feel pressured by these thoughts. They arrived softly, like distant echoes, and Psyche, thoughtful as ever, began to hold them alongside her trust. One evening, while walking through a quiet chamber, she noticed a small object resting on a low table. A lantern. It was simple, made of pale metal, its glass slightly clouded, as if it had been waiting. The lantern was unlit. Psyche paused beside it. She did not touch it at first. She simply noticed the way it caught the lamplight, the way its handle fit naturally into the curve of a hand. That night, as she lay in bed, the presence beside her felt especially near. The voice spoke of ordinary things, of the gardens, of the sound of water, of how the palace rested when she slept. Psyche listened, her heart full and quiet, and yet the image of the lantern lingered in her thoughts. She thought of light, not the harsh light of exposure, but the soft light of understanding, the kind of light that reveals gently without burning away what it touches. She wondered if such a light could exist here without breaking the trust she had built. Her curiosity did not feel like rebellion. It felt like the next step of intimacy, the desire to know more deeply what she already loved. As the voice grew quiet and sleep hovered close, Psyche made a decision. Not sudden, not reckless. A decision formed from many small moments of care. When the presence beside her finally settled into stillness, Psyche rose slowly from the bed. She moved with great care, as though the night itself were fragile. Her feet touched the cool floor softly, her breath stayed slow. She crossed the room and lifted the lantern. It was lighter than she expected. Psyche paused. This moment did not feel dangerous, it felt significant. She listened to the quiet of the palace, to the steadiness of her own heart, to the balance between trust and curiosity. Then, with tenderness rather than urgency, she lit the lantern. The flame bloomed softly, not bright, not startling, just enough light to see. The glow spread gently across the room, touching walls and fabric, turning shadows into shapes. Psyche lifted the lantern slightly, allowing the light to travel where it wished. And there, resting in the quiet beside her, she saw him. Eros. Not fearsome, not commanding. He lay in peaceful stillness, his presence calm and human, his expression softened by sleep. The light revealed not a stranger, but someone familiar in feeling. The kindness, the care, the patience she had known all along. Psyche felt no shock, only recognition. A warmth spread through her chest, relief mixed with awe, understanding mingled with affection. She saw the truth she had sensed, that the unseen presence was not withholding, but protecting something delicate. Yet, even gentle light has consequence. A small movement, barely more than a breath, caused the flame to flicker. A single drop of warm oil fell from the lantern. It did not burn fiercely, it did not wound, but it startled. And in that small disruption, the stillness shifted. Eros stirred. The moment stretched, not in panic, but in realization. The trust they had shared was real, and now it had changed. Not shattered, but transformed. Eros opened his eyes. There was no anger in his gaze, no accusation, only sadness and understanding. "Psyche," he said softly, "you have learned something important." Psyche's heart ached, not with guilt, but with the awareness that curiosity carries responsibility. She had seen, and seeing had altered the shape of their bond. Eros rose slowly, the light touching his features with gentleness. "This was always meant to be part of your journey," he said, "but it cannot be the end of it." The palace grew quieter still, as if holding its breath. Eros spoke not of punishment, but of growth. "Love," he said, "asks us to trust what we cannot see. And sometimes it asks us to walk alone for a while, so that trust may become understanding." The light dimmed, not abruptly, not harshly. The palace began to soften, its edges less certain. Eros stepped back, his presence receding like a melody fading at dusk. Psyche reached out, not in desperation, but in acknowledgement. She understood now. This moment was not an ending, it was a turning. As the palace dissolved into quiet air, Psyche found herself standing beneath the open sky once more. The lantern lay unlit at her feet. The night was calm. And though she was alone, she was not abandoned. Curiosity had opened a door, not into loss, but into transformation. When the palace faded, it did not vanish all at once. It thinned. Edges softened. Light loosened its hold. Walls that had once felt solid became pale impressions, like memories gently releasing their shape. And then, Psyche stood beneath the open sky. The ground beneath her feet was steady. The night air was cool and familiar. Stars shone above her, patient and unchanged. She was alone, but not suddenly, not violently. Alone in the way one is alone when a long conversation has ended and silence remains to be understood. Psyche did not cry out. She did not run. She stood very still, allowing the moment to settle. Her heart felt full and quiet at the same time, full of what had been, quiet with what was now asked of her. The lantern lay at her feet, dark and harmless. She looked at it once, then turned her gaze back to the sky. Curiosity had led her here. Not reckless curiosity, not careless curiosity, but the kind that grows when trust and intimacy have deepened to the point where understanding feels necessary. And now, curiosity had opened the way to something new. Psyche began to walk, not with urgency, but with attentiveness. Each step was measured, each breath unforced. The land around her felt wider than before, as though the world had opened slightly, making room for her to move forward on her own. Paths appeared beneath her feet, not sharply defined, but gently suggested. She followed them without question. As she walked, Psyche noticed that the world seemed to respond to her listening. The wind shifted when she paused. Birds settled when she rested. The rhythm of her steps began to align with the rhythm of the land. She was no longer being carried. She was walking. At first, this felt strange. In the palace, everything had been prepared. Care had arrived before she knew she needed it. Now, she noticed hunger and learned to satisfy it herself. She noticed fatigue and learned when to rest. There was no hardship in this, only learning. Learning how to attend to her own needs with the same gentleness she had received. Sometimes, Psyche would stop and sit quietly, allowing thoughts to pass without holding them. She remembered Eros's voice, not as instruction, but as reassurance. You are safe. You are capable. Listen. She listened now more deeply than ever. In this listening, guidance appeared, not as commands, but as subtle assistance. A path seemed clearer in the morning light. A stream appeared when she was thirsty. A place to rest revealed itself just as weariness arrived. Psyche understood then that unseen kindness had not vanished. It had changed its form. She was being supported, not carried, and there is a difference. Carrying teaches comfort. Walking teaches confidence. Psyche felt herself changing, not dramatically, not all at once, but steadily. Her steps grew more certain, her posture straighter. She began to trust her own sense of timing, her own instincts about when to move and when to wait. Curiosity no longer felt restless. It felt grounded. She wondered about Eros, not with longing that pulled her backward, but with gratitude that warmed her forward. As days passed, Psyche came upon places that asked something of her. Not trials in the sense of punishment, but moments that required patience, attention, and care. She noticed how easily frustration could arise when something took time, and she noticed how quickly it softened when she slowed her breath and listened again. In these moments, Psyche felt something new: self-trust. Not arrogance, not certainty, but a quiet confidence that said, I can remain present, even when I do not yet know the outcome. This was a skill she had not learned in the palace. This was something she could only learn here. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Psyche rested beside a small grove of trees. The air smelled of leaves and earth. The light filtered gently through branches. She sat, hands resting in her lap, and allowed herself to simply be. In the stillness, she felt Eros's presence, not beside her, but within the memory of how she listened now. She understood then that love had not left her. It had moved inward. And inward movement, she was learning, is often the hardest part of growth. But it is also the most enduring. That night, as Psyche slept beneath the open sky, her dreams were calm. She dreamed of walking steadily, of doors opening at the right moment, of unseen hands arranging what she could not yet reach. When she woke, she felt rested, ready. The path ahead would soon ask more of her, not in suffering, but in practice. Practice in patience, practice in care, practice in trusting cooperation rather than force. Psyche rose and continued walking, her steps aligned with the quiet guidance that now felt familiar. She did not know what tasks awaited her, but she knew how to meet them, with attention, with gentleness, with trust in the unseen kindness that had never truly left her. And as she walked onward, the world seemed to respond, as if recognizing that Psyche was no longer simply protected. She was becoming. The first task did not announce itself as a trial. It arrived quietly, as so many important things do, as a situation that simply asked for attention. Psyche came upon a wide clearing where the ground was scattered with countless small objects, seeds, grains, and fragments, all mixed together in gentle disorder. They were not dangerous. They were not overwhelming at first glance. They were many. The kind of many that asks for patience rather than strength. Psyche stood at the edge of the clearing and did not rush forward. She felt no panic, only a question forming gently within her. How shall I begin? She knelt and touched the ground, letting the texture of soil and seed anchor her attention. One thing at a time, she thought. And so she began. She sorted slowly, her hands moving with care. Seed from seed, grain from grain. She did not measure progress by how much remained, but by the steadiness of her movement. As she worked, she noticed something quietly remarkable. She was not alone. Small movements stirred around her. Ants moving with purpose, tiny creatures passing seeds from place to place, working not in haste, but in harmony. They did not speak, they did not instruct, they simply worked alongside her. Psyche smiled softly, understanding that cooperation does not always require words. When the task was complete, she felt no triumph, only calm satisfaction. Not because the work was finished, but because she had remained present throughout. She rose, brushed her hands together, and continued on her way. The next task arrived differently. Psyche reached a narrow path bordered by thick growth. The way forward was visible, but it was guarded by restless energy, not hostile, just active. The air buzzed with movement. Psyche paused. She remembered how force had never served her well. Instead of pushing through, she stood still and listened. She noticed rhythms, moments when the movement softened, when space opened naturally. Timing revealed itself to the patient eye. When Psyche stepped forward, she did so gently, moving with the rhythm rather than against it. The path opened. No struggle, no harm, just cooperation with what already existed. As Psyche walked on, she felt herself changing again, not in obvious ways, but in subtle ones. Her breath remained calm even when she did not know what lay ahead. Her thoughts slowed, making space for perception. She began to trust that solutions often emerge when effort relaxes. Another task appeared as evening approached. A container sat beside a quiet stream, empty, waiting. The instruction was simple: fill it. But Psyche noticed that the stream flowed gently, never forcefully. If she rushed, water spilled away. If she waited, the current guided itself. She knelt and allowed the vessel to fill slowly, honoring the pace of the water. Patience, she learned, is a form of respect. By the time the container was full, the sky had darkened. Stars emerged one by one. Psyche rested beside the stream, listening to the water continue its endless work, never hurried, never exhausted. She felt something settle within her, a deep trust that she did not need to strain to belong in the world. The final task did not involve movement at all. It arrived as stillness. Psyche found herself in a quiet place, asked to wait without distraction, without seeking the next step. At first, waiting felt unfamiliar. Then it became peaceful. She listened to her breath. She listened to the sounds around her. She listened inwardly. And in that listening, she felt guidance, not as direction, but as reassurance. "You are learning," the silence seemed to say. "You are becoming steady." When Psyche rose from that place, she felt complete, not finished, but integrated. She had learned how to work patiently, how to move with timing, how to honor pace, how to rest without guilt. These were not punishments, they were practices of becoming whole. As she continued onward, the world responded with a new gentleness. Paths felt clearer, the air felt warmer. And somewhere, beyond sight but not beyond feeling, Eros was aware of her progress, not watching to judge, listening to understand. Psyche walked on, carrying with her the quiet knowledge that love grows strongest when supported by self-trust. And she felt, for the first time, that she was nearly ready to meet love again, not as someone sheltered, but as someone transformed. By the time Psyche reached the final stretch of her journey, the world felt different beneath her feet. Not because the land had changed, but because she had. Her steps were unhurried. Her breath moved easily. Her thoughts no longer rushed ahead of her body. She walked as someone who trusted timing. The air around her felt open, as though space itself had learned her rhythm and chosen to move with her. Psyche sensed that she was nearing the end, not through signs or instructions, but through a quiet inner knowing. The way one knows when night has fully arrived, the way one knows when sleep is close. Nothing needed to be forced. She came to a gentle rise in the land, where the horizon widened and the sky seemed closer than before. The light here was soft, neither day nor night, but something in between, a place of meeting. Psyche stopped. She did not call out. She did not search. She waited. Waiting had become familiar to her now, not empty, not restless, a kind of listening that trusted what would arrive in its own time. And then she felt it. A presence, not sudden, not overwhelming, a warmth she recognized immediately, the way one recognizes a melody before the first note fully sounds. Eros approached quietly. No palace rose around them, no ceremony unfolded. He stood before her as himself, gentle, attentive, unguarded. They looked at one another without urgency. So much had been learned in the space between them. Psyche felt no need to explain herself. Eros felt no need to test her. Understanding moved between them like breath. "You have grown," Eros said softly, not as praise, as recognition. Psyche nodded, not in pride, in truth. I learned how to listen, she replied. To myself, to the world, to what remains unseen. Eros smiled, not broadly, but with the quiet joy of someone who sees their hope fulfilled. Love stood differently between them now. It was no longer sheltered only by mystery, nor strained by curiosity. It was balanced, held equally by trust and understanding. Eros did not promise to hide again. Psyche did not promise to never wonder. They understood that intimacy is not the absence of questions, but the willingness to meet them gently. Around them, the air seemed to respond. Light softened. The land felt welcoming. Psyche sensed that something within her had settled into its place. Not perfection, wholeness. She had learned that care could be received, and that strength could be grown. She had learned that love does not require constant reassurance, only presence. Eros took Psyche's hand, not to lead her away, not to claim, simply to walk beside her. They moved together slowly, their steps aligned naturally. The world did not rush to change around them. It did not need to. Transformation had already occurred where it mattered most. In time, their story became one of quiet continuity. Not an ending sealed in gold, but a living rhythm. They shared days and nights, presence and space. They understood when to speak and when to listen. Psyche no longer feared the dark. She had learned that unseen kindness often works most faithfully there. And so, as this story begins to rest, let its final meaning settle gently. Transformation is not something done to us. It is something we grow into. Trust is not blindness. It is patience. Love is not possession. It is presence. Imagine Psyche and Eros walking together as twilight deepens. No hurry, no demand, just the ease of companionship earned through understanding. And imagine yourself, listening to this story, carrying its quiet lessons into rest. If your thoughts drift, let them. If sleep arrives, welcome it. Nothing more is required. The lantern has done its work. The promise has been kept. Good night.